I should maybe drill the hole for the wheel, which needs to be right about there on that axis, and right about there on that axis. So that is 5/8 of an inch from the end, which makes sense since these are 1.25 inches in diameter. So I need holes bored in these. Alright, so under the head of the bolt, I'm going to have a washer. Then I'm going to have the wheel. I'm going to have another small washer and a fender washer. Then I'm going to put it through there, and I'm going to have a fender washer on there. So those bolts are considerably longer than I need. So that is, I believe, a 3-inch bolt. So let's see what happens with a 2.5. Washer, wheel, washer, fender washer, wood, fender washer. And that should be about the length I want, I believe. I don't think I could go a 1/2 inch less. No, for sure I couldn't. So that is a plan, I guess. So that's the way those will be. I can either have them that way about, or this way about will give me a little more room, I guess, which would probably be the best way. So that means that I would want my slot to end about there. these are the wheels don't mount on these slots, but there will be the same size bolts, or same diameter anyway, that do mount. So they will slide freely, which is a good thing. So I guess I'm getting down to almost being where I need to be. And slide it back up here and say, I think I want my clamping hole to be right about there. Yes. And it will be centered on the width of the slot, which is a 1/16 of an inch wider than it should have been for some reason. So that is the center of my clamping hole for that one. So I have this cam clamp. I can slide that to wherever I need it to be, and leave it over the cam clamp, and that will lock it in place. Okay, it's finally finished. I'm quite happy with it. It seems quite solid. We'll see how well it works once I get a piece mounted. The batteries on my microphone ran down yesterday when I was doing the last hour or so of the construction on it, so I did record all the construction of it, but in my shop here a lot of it was off camera, and I did have some issues with the sound, so I'll just do a quick overview here as a wrap up, I guess. So in terms of holding it onto the lathe, I just made some clamp blocks. These are I guess they're similar to toilet bolts, but and a threaded knob. They're part of a jig and fixture hardware kit that I purchased. I think I'm going to go to a longer one for those, though. So the bar is sized to be a snug fit between the ways and be less, the thickness of this is less than the thickness of the ways, so that it the clamp block bears on the underside of the ways, and there'll be a bit of a gap here, so it pulls down. The clamp blocks, I cut them to the width I wanted, left them a little long, and just mounted them on a screw chuck or a woodworm screw, and turned them around on the ends to the width that would fit between the webs that support the turn them to the length that would fit between the webs that support the, so even if those are turned sideways, I can still slide the thing back and forth, and I don't have to locate it where there isn't a rib or something. And then I just used a Forstner bit, roughly the size of that, to make a, and no real reason for doing that, I suppose. It just, I guess it keeps the bolt from turning. And these are narrow enough that they'll go down between the ways. I don't have to slide it on from the end, in other words. I can put it on anywhere. Without having to take the... Actually, feels like it's overlapping a bit. I wonder if that hole's slightly off center. And it feels like it goes better that way. And what else? I've got one on each side this time, so that should make things more stable. The other one, I just had it on that side, so I only had one clamp, so these are just barely long enough. I would prefer to have a little excess, so I'm going to switch to a longer one here. And I got a fender washer to spread the load of the clamping knob. So the base is 3/4 inch plywood. Most of the dimensions that I've got here were determined by the material I had on hand, so I didn't have to go and buy anything. I had some, I happened to have some scraps of 3/4 inch plywood left over from another project, and they were this wide, so I just made it sized for that. I believe that I can... My intent was to be able to use it on something 8 inches in diameter, so that was kind of what I was shooting for. Because these will only retract until the washer seats against the side of the hole here, so I had to make the hole. I think that hole is about 12 inches in diameter in order to give me the ability to mount 8 inches I think I've got room to mount 8 inches there, maybe a little more. And I've used the cam clamps, the same type of cam clamps that I used on my other one. I find them handy for things like this, where I need to be able to make an adjustment and then conveniently lock it down. These are available in 5/16 and they're standard thread 5/16, 18, or 1/4 20. And these ones happen to be 1/4 20 because actually they didn't have to be, now that I think about it, but the axle pins, these wheels, they're inline skate wheels, and the axle hole, they fit with no slop on a 1/4 inch bolt shank. So I needed a 1/4 inch there, and I guess I just never, I could have used 5/16 there. I never even thought about it. I think the 1/4 inch should do the job quite well anyway. So again, I was just using up scraps of plywood that I had here, so that's more or less why things are the size they are, because that's what size the scraps were. I did route channels for the arms to slide in. And that's it. It's pretty simple, really. The only dimensions that are key is that this hole has to be centered on the spindle of your lathe. So if you've got a 12-inch lathe, then the center of this hole needs to be 6 inches above the ways. If you've got a 16-inch lathe, then it needs to be 8 inches. This is a 24-inch lathe, so the center of this hole had to be 12 inches. If it's off a little bit, it's not going to matter, but it'll just it'll make a difference on how close. With these pulled back all the way, that's my maximum diameter that I can use the steady rest on. If this hole was off center a bit, then that would reduce my maximum diameter a bit. So the thing that spurred me to finally get around to making that was a piece I was trying to work, and I needed more support. Alright, so I'm just going to see how true that is turning before I start setting up my steady rest. And that seems to be turning very true, so I guess putting it in a plastic bag was a good idea. It doesn't seem to have moved at all, even though it took me several days actually to make this. I wasn't getting all that much time on it each day. So okay, and locking that down makes it quite rigid. It probably isn't all that rigid. This is only 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood, so there's possibility of some flexing that way, but in terms of the other way, it seems quite solid. Let's give it a little more pressure than that. Okay, so those seem to be exerting roughly the same amount of pressure. And it's not much pressure. It's just enough that turning the wheel makes the piece turn. So let's see what happens when I turn the lathe on. And that seems to be going to work fairly well. So I guess I can go back to hollowing on that thing and see how that works out. Okay. Now see how it works with no tailstock there. I think that should be just fine.